Was everybody on the meeting this morning?
I was. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I know Janine got on and talked about being on video, which I totally agree. It's just nice to see people's faces and reactions. So thank you for having your camera on. This is a no judgment zone, so it doesn't matter as long as you're clothed. Well, I'll give people another minute to jump on. We got a handful of people here. Yeah, well, I'll start by saying thanks for coming. I know right now it's very hard to stay focused, and I am very much in that boat. There are way more important things to my heart than real estate right now. So trying to still be productive and find ways to, connect with the community and do my part and stand for what I believe in, and also be here for you guys and, use the skills I have to keep my real estate business going, quite frankly, so I can support financially some organizations out there that really need it right now. So I am a little distracted, and I'm telling you that because I want you to know that it's okay to feel like screen overload and feed burnout, and just feeling out of sorts is very typical right now. Is anybody else feeling just off kilter, just from routine in general? And I've been really struggling with that over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's important to say that that is really common right now, and that it's okay, and that you got to do what your heart needs. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you took the time to come and participate in this. And it's important to give yourself some time to work on yourself, and you can still care about what's happening and still allow some time to do what you feel you need to support everything that's happening right now, and to stay safe, because shoot, we're still in a pandemic, y'all. So one of the things that I'm noticing happening in the market despite COVID is that there is an insane need for buyers right now. Is anybody else out with buyers right now and feeling the tremendous competition?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or anybody who has had a listing lately where you've seen just crazy attention, or even just trying to schedule a showing, finding that to be difficult. So I had a listing, this was about 2 weeks ago now. We put it into MLS and immediately were bombarded. This was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, just outside of Washington Heights, a great starter home, awesome neighborhood. It was unique in that it has a big backyard and a 2-car garage plus a parking spot in the city, and in really great shape. So kind of your general appeal, typically first-time home buyer type of home. It was listed for $169,900. We did do that strategically. I think you've probably noticed we're in a chicken and egg situation right now. So buyers and agents are expecting to write well over asking price. And so prices, if you're thinking about how you're pricing a home with your sellers, you have to consider that. So you can't necessarily price a home at market value or what you think purchase price will be, because people expect to write over. So you have to price it under to make it appealing to write an offer over. But there's a real delicate balance there. What we found was that the demand was high as we expected, but even higher than we anticipated. With this low inventory, it was nuts. We had 53 showings in 2 days. We had 15 offers. That is unbelievable. That is not who can compete in 15 offers, right? How do you even get through that crowd? And there are some things that other agents did in communicating with me and trying to set up showings and sending me offers that made them stand out in a good way and made them stand out in a bad way. And I will tell you, when you have 15 offers, what is on paper is not the only thing your sellers should be considering. It's who are we working with, and how is this transaction going to go? And is this going to be smooth? And do we have somebody who's dramatic? doesn't pay attention to details, is going to play by their own rules, is representing their client fully, is, you know, lovely and considerate and communicates clearly and reads directions and writes their forms properly, or are they kind of a mess? And you bet that's going to affect how the rest of the transaction goes. So those things are really worth considering when you're looking at offers as a listing agent, but also when you are the buyer's agent. You are representing your buyer, not yourself. And there are things you should be doing from the moment you schedule that showing or the moment you have a buyer with an interest in the property. There are things you should be doing from the get-go. This is not the kind of thing, even though it's fast-paced and you're probably showing a lot of properties and you feel harried. Is anybody else feeling that, like energy that you just gotta go fast? And is anybody noticing that that makes people a little sloppy? Do you ever feel like when you're in a hurry, stuff does not get done as thoroughly, as nicely as you would normally do them? Perhaps. I know I do. I have definitely turned in offers in a hurry where I've missed something or not filled something out properly. And it's embarrassing and you can't recover from that. It's very hard to come back from that. And in this crazy competitive market, you cannot afford to make those mistakes. Your client can't afford for you to make those mistakes. So there's some things I want to tell you about that, you know, I notice some practices that I always am sure that I do or I should be doing, and some things that I was watching for as a listing agent, representing my sellers to make sure that people are going to be the agent and the buyer and the team that we want to work with who's going to make this a smooth transaction and help us get to closing with minimal drama and mistakes and the kinds of things that cause problems along the way. So when you go into MLS, you've got a client with an interest in a property. How many people actually look at the documents right away? Full honesty. Do you know where to find them? Do you send them to your clients ahead of time? Do you read them? I have a bunch of blank
I just want to
faces.
clarify that my
Yeah.
blank face is because I just signed on yesterday, so I will not be able to answer any of these questions. So if I'm
That's
not
okay.
saying me, that's because that's the reason.
Cool. I know there are some other people in here though who do know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Tracy, you're on mute, but oh no, you're new too?
Yeah, I just signed on last week, so I'm in the same boat.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you.
I do take a look at the documents. Sometimes I do forget, but I do not send them to my clients unless I feel like there's something important to show them. But I guess I could always send it to them for them to just have.
Yeah, and I know that it's when you're moving fast and you're, you know, people are asking you about houses and you're trying to send everything out and you're juggling a bunch of things. It's hard to like thoroughly go through all of the details. But I will tell you, and I am guilty of this too, absolutely. But with everything going on with COVID, are you noticing when you schedule showings that there are a lot of blocked times now? If everybody's been in there,
yeah,
are you seeing the like 30-minute? Yeah, no overlaps. That is making it very challenging to schedule showings. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that just in certain areas that there's no overlaps? Because I was at a showing yesterday and there were 3 groups that were all booked at the same time. This was out on a walk though.
Okay. It seems to be more common practice city of Milwaukee and nearby areas, but I'm majority seeing that still true, and it may start to change even though we just had our highest count of COVID in Milwaukee like 3 days ago. But I think people are, as they're transitioning to the less of the safer at home, I think we'll see less of that, but it is still happening. The other thing I'll say is with my listing, I had it set up to not overlap, and showing time had a glitch and was multiple booking the same time. And I was watching it, so I went through and like moved people around. But I think if an agent just sets it and forgets it, they're not catching that.
Well, I think it was because the family still lived there and they were the ones accepting all the showings and stuff. So maybe they were open to people coming
Could
in.
be. Could be.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it should say in the showing notes if they are not allowing overlapping. So it's something to watch for, and it's something to be aware of. It's definitely something I'm setting my buyers up for. So if you're working on your buyer consultation, which is one of your top 5 that you should be working on, one of the things that's important to do is, probably the most important thing, is to set their expectations. And when you talk about showings, it's good to just give them a heads up. Like, normally our showings might be a 1-hour window, but right now we're getting a half hour, and they're asking us not to have overlapping time. So we need to be really conscious of watching, I'll be watching the schedule or the clock to make sure we're not, going overtime. And this is a nice opportunity for you to be in the house without other people. It doesn't always happen, but this is something that is more common practice right now. It also means if you're interested in a house or a condo, you've got to tell me as soon as possible, because showings fill up fast. And there are times when those half hours end up at weird times in the day. And so there's like a 15-minute window. I had people doing 15-minute showings, which is ridiculous. Don't put your client through a 15-minute showing and then ask them to write an offer $15,000 over asking price, right? Like, that's absurd. Nobody, like, I can't even decide on shoes in 15 minutes. You want them to buy a house in 15 minutes? That's nuts. So set them up for success. Don't squeeze them into something like that, and make sure that they understand ahead of time why this is happening. It's going to help them feel more at ease, less nervous. You want them to be in a good place when they're making an offer. Also, read all those notes. Read all the notes in the listing. Pay attention to the details. And I know you've seen that not all listing agents have the most filled out form on MLS. There's stuff missing, right? If there's something like that that's of concern to your client, keep that in mind, make a note or reach out to them, but read the notes. I cannot tell you how many people I had texting and calling and emailing me saying, well, I want to show it on Thursday and I can't get into the showing time. Well, it says right there, Saturday, Sunday showings. And it says right there the times they start and end. And it says how long they should be. Like, don't contact the listing agent with a question that could be answered by the MLS listing or the documents in the listing. When I started out, I worked with mostly buyers. I still work with mostly buyers. And it's very easy to get in the mindset of like, oh, this lazy listing agent, they didn't do this or that, or like they just sit at home and wait for people to call about the listing. They don't have to run around with buyers. They don't know what it's like. At the end of the day, listing agents are getting absolutely hammered with contacts right now. If they have a popular listing, that's all they're doing. That's all I did for 2 days, was respond to questions about that listing. I couldn't do anything else. And so keep that in mind, like, be considerate of the fact that they're getting bombarded. And if you're going to reach out to them, it better be something good. It better be worthwhile. And it better not be something that's gonna tick them off, because they're gonna make a mental note of it when your offer comes in. So make sure you're reading all the notes, make sure you're reading all the documents, and share that with your buyers ahead of time. They should know what a condition report is before they're signing the offer. They should have a chance to look at that and talk to you about it before they sign the offer. And that's something you can touch on in your buyer consultation and then go back to once you're on showings. But it's important. It's not something they should suddenly be surprised by when you're writing their offer, because whatever's in there might not be okay with them. And now you've gone through all that trouble and taken up a spot from somebody else who wanted to look at the house, and they don't even want to write an offer. The other thing is, when you're scheduling those showings, help them prepare to be considerate of the sellers. In some cases, they have kids, they have dogs, or, elderly relatives living with them, or whatever. They have good reason why they have those limited times set up, and they don't want people using their bathroom. They don't want people touching everything. Help your buyers be good citizens, good visitors of these homes, and set them up in advance. I also say that because, has anybody noticed cameras in houses? Like, more so than ever before, I'm seeing cameras and I'm seeing speakers. And it's good to make sure that your clients are aware that there's a very good chance that they're on film and they're going to be heard. And so whatever they're doing better be something they'd be okay with doing in front of the seller. especially considering that they may be trying to win over the seller with an offer and competition, but also just to be good people, right? Like that should be standard. You know, they shouldn't be going into people's like drawers in their dresser. The dresser doesn't come with the house, you know? So make sure that they are set up for success on the perspective of an offer, and also just to be considerate of the seller. Also making sure that they have masks, or you have masks ready to go. I always, as a showing agent, I always have extra gloves, hand sanitizer, and shoe covers. It is not 100% the listing agent's responsibility to have that stuff there. They should, but in a high volume situation, there's a good chance that stuff's been used up. So be ready, be prepared. If they're, especially if they're asking that you use that stuff, just look like you know what you're doing. Be professional, have your stuff together. Like I said, there's a chance they could see what you're doing, and also you should act at all times as if the seller's watching you. The next thing is connecting with the agent. So if you do feel like you need to reach out to the agent, and normally when it's not so crazy, I highly recommend this, making that human touch, and I'm talking phone call, I'm not talking text. Connecting with that agent, helping them to know your name, to ask thoughtful, non-annoying questions that don't have answers in MLS already, and just making that connection can be great. But I can tell you right now, it's a little bit harder for listing agents to do that, and it may be harder to get a hold of them. And don't hold that against them, because they're probably getting bombarded. So making that connection, if you're going to do it, make sure it's a really smart question, that you have your stuff ready to go, that you are considerate of their time. So calling and saying, you know, I'm calling about such and such listing. This is, you know, this is Amanda from Keller Williams. I'm calling about your listing on Martin Drive. Do you have a moment, or is it better if I send you a couple of questions by text or email? And then they can let me know, actually, I'm busy, I'll call you back, or yeah, send me something by text. And then whatever I'm sending them better be something thoughtful that is not in the listing information already. And usually what I'm asking about is, what is the seller's preferred closing date? If they have that in mind, if there's something timeline related that we should consider, if they have another place to go to lined up yet, because that may give you an indication of whether they may want some post-closing occupancy, and you can even ask that. It's a good thing to check with your buyers as well. Are they comfortable with that? And what that means is essentially it's like a mini lease. So the property closes on closing day, but then the seller gets to stay there for a set number of days after closing, and they might pay rent for it on a daily basis, or the buyer may say, you don't have to pay me rent. There could be a security deposit. There's an addendum O, which is the occupancy agreement, that would go with the offer if you're going to do this. And that can be something very beneficial to a seller if your buyer's comfortable with it. And it does spell out things like who's responsible for the utilities at that time, you know, insurance, how many keys and who has them. Can the new owner have access to the property within so many hours? So, you know, what's the consequence if the seller stays longer than the set number of days? So it's all in the addendum O, and that is in zip forms and DocuSign. That's something to consider. It's definitely something to talk about with your buyer before you go telling a listing agent that they're going to do that. But it's not a bad idea to ask if that's even something that the seller would be interested in. I also ask about an offer review time, if they have something planned for when they, you know, plan to respond to offers. That's really good for you and your buyer to know, how much time do we have to get an offer together? Do we have to scramble? Do we have 2 days until they're going to be reviewed? You know, how quickly do we need to move? How do we need to prioritize our time for this? And, you know, do you have any requests as far as how we send that over? When I had the listing on Martin Drive, I sent out an email in advance to everyone who was scheduled to show the property, and it had all the information about showing details, even though they were in the showing time details as well, and all the information about sending in an offer. I wanted it to be labeled a certain way in the subject. I, you know, said, if you want bonus points, send a cover page so I know what's happening in the offer. I was very clear about what we were looking for. So there was no question. And I still got calls from people asking the same questions. Not cool. I don't have time for that. You don't have time for that. Take a moment to read the documents. I also printed them out and put them in the house, and people still called me. So just be really mindful of what's being provided to you. They're trying to set you up for success. And if they aren't, then be really smart about the questions you're asking. Prepare in advance. Don't bug them the day that you have the showing and you're frantically trying to figure out if you can write an offer in time. You want to know when they want a closing date. Like, be proactive. Contact them ahead of time. Ask smart questions. Be really mindful of what's out there on the listing. And also know that if the listing was brand new when you looked at it, there's a chance that 3 days later, there's other stuff in there. So go back in and double check to make sure that there's not something in there that you're looking for. And be patient. They're busy, just like you are. So if you don't hear from them immediately, just be kind. That impression you give of what you're going to be like to work with can work for you or against you in relation to your client. So keep that in mind. When it comes to showings, is everybody using Showing Time? Do you have the app? Does everybody have the app for Showing Time?
I use it.
Okay. Does everybody have the app for MLS?
I do.
Okay. So really quick, easy ways to have that information at your fingertips is make sure you have the Flex MLS app. Very user-friendly. It's gotten much better over time. It's still a little clunky, but way better than it used to be. And Showing Time has its own app as well. It is so cool. It has all of your requested showings listed, whether they're confirmed or pending or canceled or declined. You can click on the listing. You can get all the information about the showing details, whether it's a lockbox code or a code to get into a condo building. Any other instructions are in there, and then you can click Get Directions, and it'll give you it'll go right to your GPS. It's super user friendly. When you get things set up in Showing Time, make sure that you are double checking the information that's sent to you in advance of your showing. Every once in a blue moon, you're going to get a listing where the key is at the listing office. And you will look like a moron if you get to a property and there's no lockbox and you can't get your buyer in. In the speed of the market right now, you can't afford to do that. So make sure you're looking at that stuff in advance. The night before you do your showings, or the morning before your showing day, or give yourself enough time that if there's weird stuff in there, you're figuring it out in advance. Sometimes, has anybody had a showing where you get the showing confirmation and there's no instructions in it? There's like no lockbox code, or there's nothing about how to get in. It happens sometimes. Also something to figure out in advance, not while your clients are standing outside in a mask in the heat and you're on the phone trying to figure out how to get in, right? Be a professional. So make sure you're looking at that stuff. Does everybody have access to SentryLock?
No.
What do you mean
Okay.
by that exactly?
SentryLock?
Because I have like a lockbox, but what do you mean having access to SentryLock? Is that like a different kind of lockbox?
So you should have an app on your phone or a card that will get you into SentryLock lockboxes.
I have
And
a card on the back. Is that what you're talking about?
on the back of the lockbox?
Yeah. But like
There should,
so this is all electronical you're talking about.
yeah, so SentryLock are the electronic lockboxes, and you should have an app on your phone that is specific to you. You sign into it, and that's how you get the SentryLock lockboxes to open. Now, the GMAR also offered cards where you could like slide it in. Those, if you use the card, you can't use the app, or at least that's how it has been in my experience. So I don't use the card at all, because once you use the card, then you can't get the app to work, and you've got to load the card, and it's a whole thing. So GMAR has made it very easy. The Greater Milwaukee Association of Realtors, we pay them dues. Part of your dues pay for SentryLock. So you have a right to lock boxes, that cost you nothing additional. They're rented. It's a monthly fee you pay as part of your GMAR dues. And you have the use of that app to get into SentryLock lockboxes. Now keep in mind, you can get into any SentryLock lockbox with your app at any time. You don't have to have a confirmed showing, but you can't go into a house without a confirmed showing. Obviously, that's trespassing. So you should still be confirming your showings through showing time or however it's set up in MLS. But SentryLock, if you do not have that set up or you're not sure, contact the GMAR. They just sent out a newsletter this week, and yeah, the app is called SentryKey RE. They sent out a newsletter this week that had a link to an email. They are doing this remotely now. We used to have to go and sit in a really ridiculously boring class. We don't have to do that anymore. So if you don't have that access yet or you're unsure, you should be emailing GMAR. There's a link on the website as well. If you search SentryLock, it should pop up, and that's how you can get signed up for that. I will tell you, one of the things that annoys me the most as a listing agent, these SentryLocks have been out for over a year, is people who contact me and say, can you send me a one-day code? I don't have SentryLock yet. There's no excuse. It takes like 5 seconds. It's not that big of a deal. Just do it. Also, a seller could say, I don't want people to have a code to the lockbox because they could give it to anybody in theory, even though they shouldn't, and they could deny you access. So you better have your SentryLock set up just to be sure. That's another way embarrassing thing to happen when you get to a house and you're like, oh, I don't have a code. So make sure you've got SentryLock set up. That's really important. You should be doing that as a showing agent. If you're showing for a different agent too, you should still have access through SentryLock. Make sure you've got that set up for sure. With COVID, there is a COVID form. Yes, GMAR has info on their site. Just search SentryLock. With COVID, there is a form out there about showings. Some sellers are having those posted on the listing as one of the documents. Check for that in advance. They, in some cases, are requiring buyers and agents to sign that before a showing. And again, that's something you don't want to be doing on the front lawn before your showing starts and you're eating up your half hour or your short amount of time to get through. So when you see documents, make sure you're looking for that. Make sure you're reading the notes to see if they require that. You may also get a showing time follow-up alert or email once your showing's confirmed. It might say, here's the form, send it over, and get that into zip forms and get it signed before you do your showing. Ignoring, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Where would we see that form? Would that be on the MLS, or is there a way we can see it right now?
So the form, if you just want to see what it looks like, it's in zip forms or DocuSign. I think it's COVID showing. I'm trying to remember the title of it, but it is a showing document for COVID. It's not the COVID addendum. It's a different document. It should, if they're using it, it should be in the documents for that listing with the seller signature. They might not have it in there, and they may send it as a follow-up. So if your showing's confirmed, they may send it as a follow-up email. So watch for that too, and then make sure that gets filled out ahead of time. Again, this is like a test. There's all these little tests that happen along the way well before you're turning in an offer, and they are paying attention. So if you're not being considerate of their request to sign this form, how are you going to be to work with later? So keep these things in mind. It's not just to be a professional and courteous agent and to best represent your client. It's also to give them the best opportunity to get their offer accepted. So make sure that you're paying attention to those details. I mentioned video and speakers. When you're going through a showing, has anybody been in a situation where there's an agent after you and they just like want the key? Or an agent before you who just leaves the key in the door? Has anybody come across that yet?
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah. Is anybody else like really uncomfortable with that?
Yeah, I was taught that we are not allowed to give it to them because we don't know truly whether or not they're an agent. So you need to lock it back in the box for them to reopen it.
Exactly. And if you need to say, our company policy is that we return the key to the lockbox and lock the doors. Say that. You know, my launch coach told me I had to. Whatever you got to do. If you don't want to look like a mean person, you are looking out for, number one, you're making sure that you're following the instructions and rules. And number two, if you don't know that next agent, yeah, you're handing off the key to someone's house, to a stranger. I don't care if they look like a real estate agent. What does that even mean? It's like 3 people and they have masks on. Oh, you must be next. Here you go. Oh, I left it in the door. No, that is something that does happen. That is something that people do all the time. That is not something you should be doing. And when I had my listing, I actually had a chart of like, who's next? So that if there was somebody asking for the key because those showings were so tight, that they could say, what's your name? Who are you with? Oh yes, I see, you're next. At least there was some protection because I knew people were gonna just hand off the key anyway. If you wanna be proactive, ask the agent, you know, day of or, you know, day before, hey, could you just let me know who's after me, just in case they're asking for the key or they try to get in right after us. I just want to know who's coming after me so that I can make sure I'm being a good steward while there's no one on the property. Go above and beyond. You will stand out like a rock star. And this is basic stuff that if sellers heard that people did this, they would say, forget it. I'm not putting my house on the market. Like, you have to stand there for all showings. I can't believe people do this, but it happens all the time. So be considerate of that. And yeah, if you have to piss off another agent, just say like, it's policy. It's my policy. It's my company's policy. I don't hand off the key to anybody. Now, if you know the next agent, it may be another scenario. It's like Janine's after you. She'd probably be really proud if you're like, I'm sorry, I have to put the lockbox. I have to put it back. But that's something I see all the time and is super not okay, but it happens all the time. When you are done with your showing, has anybody used the Showing Time app?
I have.
Okay.
I did.
So Tim, you did? Awesome. So when you're done with the showing, Tim, have you seen what pops up on the bottom? There's like a navy blue bar, or is it green?
Yeah. And then
yeah.
They also ask for feedback and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that bar, what does the bar say? Do we know?
I don't know. It's just asking for feedback.
Yeah.
So there's a feedback one. There's also a bar at the bottom of the screen that says, done with your showing. We can let the sellers know it's safe to return home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you're done before your showing time is over, click that box. Let them know you're done.
Those don't always pop up. The feedbacks are different sometimes. I mean, it really depends on how thorough, I suppose, the selling agent is on hooking things up with showing time. Because on the app just, I mean, it seems to be random sometimes. Sometimes, you know, they just want comments. Sometimes they want to know a list of things where you just got to click in, you know. Yes,
yeah,
no.
The feedback form varies by brokerage and agent. The I'm done should be popping up unless you're done like at the end of your showing time. If you're done before, and just be careful when you're clicking like get directions or other info that you don't accidentally click that on the app, because it is like right there on the screen. But it is a nice thing to do when you're done so they can see that it's safe to return home. Same thing for like inspections, stuff like that. But yes, then you'll get a feedback request email. Are you at least getting those feedback request emails when you do showings?
Almost all the time. Almost.
And they vary. Some of them are like, you know, like multiple choice questions. Some of them are just one open box. Some of them have several open boxes. I will tell you this, it's very rare that people fill those out thoroughly. Usually they're like partial, filled out, they don't put any comments, and that's that. It is extremely helpful to sellers and listing agents to have some feedback on the property. Seems pretty standard, right? Has anybody had like 5 showings in a row and they're like, God, this is kind of overwhelming? Have you come across that? They kind of stack up. It's happened to me for sure. And it's hard to want to like do anything because you know, well, it's going to get offers anyway. Still do it. It's still looks better if you do it. It's still part of you're being a part of the community by sharing feedback. You know, consider it from the listing agent's perspective and the seller's perspective as well. But when you do that, one thing you can do, it is not a special secret that we do that. You can tell your buyers, like, this is a great opportunity for you to find out what they think of a property too. Hey, so after all the showings, you know, when you're doing your buyer consult, you can tell them, after showings, we get this feedback form and we have to give feedback on what you thought of the house. And so after we go through every house, when we're done, we'll like scoot out of the way, like hang out outside if it's not crummy out. And I'm just curious, like, what your feedback is. So I'm going to go through these questions with you, and you can do that. That's okay. They want to know the buyer's perspective. They may be asking for your like agent opinion as well, but they really want to know what the buyer thought. So why not just take a couple minutes? They're very short, and just get their feedback before you move on to the next place. Or look at your 3 or 4 houses and then say, okay, I'm going to go through these with you. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? It's going to give you more useful feedback to help them decide if it's, you know, the one to make an offer on, and an aggressive one, or if it's not a good fit, and it'll give you some good feedback to better serve them. So it's a win-win-win. The worst thing is to just let those sit, because I can see, as a listing agent, you can see who's not filling it out, and you can see who like half-heartedly filled it out. So good feedback is things that you know, if your buyer's seeing something as a concern, now of course, keep in mind, if you're writing an offer, maybe you don't want to be nitpicky about some stuff that will offend the seller. But when you're giving that feedback, keep in mind, like, they're looking for what a buyer really thinks. So if it's like, oh, you know, really great landscaping and they loved the kitchen update, you know, the layout wasn't quite working for them, they wanted a little more of an open plan, or you know, the bathroom was really small compared to what they need, you know, just the one little sink, they have multiple children, whatever it is. Also keep in mind that the feedback you're giving should not be something that was obvious before you went to the house. So if it's like, they really, you know, they don't like all the stairs. Well, guess what? It's a split level and there's stairs in all the pictures. Why did you show them a house with stairs if they don't like stairs? Like, even if they didn't realize it until they got in there, think about how you're wording that, because to a seller, that's infuriating to get feedback that they can't do anything with. So just keep that in mind. If it's like, oh, you know, the color, even though paint is not a big deal, you know, the red living room made it feel really dark, and natural light's important to them, and they just couldn't see past it, even though it's a small update. You know, you can kind of put your little twist on it, and still be honest, but giving some really useful feedback can be helpful. You know, something like, you know, they really are at the top of their budget, and so a bathroom remodel isn't in their plans, but they really appreciated, you know, the refinished hardwood floors and the newer windows. You know, they love the location, but they're reconsidering their budget because, you know, they couldn't afford an update in the bathroom at this price point, something like that. So giving nice feedback can go a long way. Get a good reputation with other agents. When you're done with the showing, if you do have questions, it can be a time to reach out to the agent. I would just say, as I said before, be proactive and try to get that stuff answered in advance. But if you do have things that come up during the showing that's pertinent to your offer writing, you can reach out after a showing. You know, like I said, just be considerate. Do you have a moment? Would you prefer I text you? If you text, does everybody put their name in the text? I know it sounds weird because it's like an email, but do you put your name in there so they know who you are? Or like,
I always
what brokerage
say,
you're with?
hi, so-and-so, my name is Paula Glowacki from Keller Williams. Like, I always introduce myself because obviously nobody knows who I am. They don't have my number saved in their phone.
Yeah, exactly. I can't tell you how many mystery texts I got from people about this property. Hey, can I get in on Saturday? For what? Who are you? What property? What are you talking about? Be like, consider the audience, consider what's going to come up on the other side. Like, yes, identify yourself. Exactly, Paula. Like, identify yourself, your brokerage, the house you're pertaining to. Don't text them through MLS and leave the link to the property in there. That's annoying. Just take it out. Just put in the address. It's just like one more thing to fill somebody's feed and email, and you have to wait for it to load, and just be thoughtful about that. But yes, absolutely, identify yourself if you're going to reach out.
Mind if I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Just getting back to asking questions before the showing, and I've noticed that whether you're Susan Powers or somebody from Keller Williams, or I mean just anybody, that there seems to be a question that I continue to ask and nobody seems to have an answer. They presume, but it's not necessarily. And I ask about city ordinance when it comes to building a fence. Now this is just a strange thing, and calling the city right now with lockdown has been virtually impossible to get in touch with anybody. So I'm wondering if you know of how to answer that question without bothering the agent who might not know the city ordinance on whether or not a particular property can build a fence.
I would go to the municipality websites. They almost always have something about permits and requirements. And you can, I mean, when you're with your buyer, if you're in the backyard and suddenly they want to know, like, oh, can we put a fence back here? You can refer to neighbor yards. Well, it looks like these guys have fences, but I couldn't say for sure if that's grandfathered in.
Right,
You know,
that's
never
the problem.
promise something that you don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say look at the website. The other thing to keep in mind is when your buyers have questions, and you have to be really thoughtful about this because you are representing them and you want them to have peace of mind and feel good about it. If you go to an agent with some red flag type questions before you send in an offer, they're gonna log that. So if you've got a buyer who's like, you know, we love this house, but we want the washer and dryer, and it says it's not included. Well, how much of a battle do you want that? Do you want to die on that hill for this house, or do you want this house? Because in competition, nobody else is asking for the washer and dryer. So if you want it, and that's the only way you're going to write an offer on this house, then yes, let's find out. Let's put it in there. If it's like, it would be nice, but it's not the end of the world, give them the perspective of the situation, because they probably don't have that perspective. They're very much in their heads about this big decision and the expense. And so they're not thinking about that. Or if there's some other small issue that's really not the end of the world, like there's a screen missing on that window. Okay, that is important. However, do we need to know that answer before you write your offer? Is that a deal breaker for you? Or can we ask later? So also consider the kinds of things you're asking about and clarifying ahead of time. You know, if you come off as somebody who doesn't do their own research, somebody who doesn't take the time to read the MLS description, somebody who doesn't know the area, somebody who, you know, a buyer who's going to nitpick the tiniest things and they're going to show you themselves right away. That stuff is red flag city for sellers and their agents. So just consider that as well. You still want to represent them. You still want to get those answers, but the timing of it is really important. The other thing to ask is, do you have offers? Now, you may think they're just going to tell me, but they technically don't have to. This is a weird loophole. If you ask, they have to tell you honestly. If you don't ask, they don't have to tell you. So they don't have to advertise it. It's really in the seller's best interest to say, we have offers, now's your chance, but not everybody does. So that's a good question to ask early on. And if you know, like if you know it's a popular listing, just assume there's a bunch of offers. Like, does it matter if there's 7 or 5 offers? Not really. Like, highest and best, cleanest offer regardless. So, oh, I lost you there. Oh goodness. There we go. So yeah, just keep that in mind as well. So when it comes to an offer, did anybody see the June calendar? All the great stuff that's coming up, classes. So good. I love Keller Williams. So there's one coming up with Jonathan Newby and Will Saleh. It's labeled on the calendar, Newby and Willie. And they're going to talk about how to write a competitive offer. So I'm only going to touch a little bit on that because they're going to get much more in depth, and we only go till 11:30. But I thought this kind of preliminary stuff, you know, from the moment you are looking at a property on MLS and contacting the agent and scheduling a showing, you are negotiating on your client's behalf. That's when it starts. It does not start when your offer gets accepted. So that's why I wanted to make sure that you heard about these things today. And then I highly recommend that you follow up with that class. I think it's, I can't remember the date now. It's on a Wednesday. I think it's in 3 weeks, to get more information about the offer itself. But what I will say, when you're writing in a competitive situation, how many people have written an offer in competition so far? Paula?
Yeah.
Anybody else written in competition?
I almost
Tim?
was going to today.
Almost today?
Almost today, but they decided no.
So, and that is something that brings up a thought to me as well. When you're doing your buyer consultation, it is really, really important that that's when you're setting your buyer's expectations, that pretty much any market right now is competitive. So if you have squeamish buyers, or you have people who are really caught off guard and turned off by that, they're never going to make an offer. And so it's important that they know in advance, and not to say that you did this wrong. Every situation's different, but it's good to set their expectations that wherever we go, there's going to probably be at least 2, 3, 10, 15 other offers. So we just have to be ready to make the cleanest, most aggressive offer. Most sellers and their agents do not counter. Most of the time you get one shot. That's it. This is not the market of their parents. If you've got first-time home buyers, the parents are like, well, what you do is you write less than asking, and they come back and you meet in the middle. That's not what's happening right now. We are in a market where homes are priced within the reasonable range on the low to mid end. Offers are coming in 10, 20, sometimes 30 over asking, $1,000 over asking, and people are being really aggressive with their terms. Most people are keeping their inspection in there. To not have an inspection is a major risk on your buyer's part. It is a big mic drop. It's a big move. It does stand out in competition, but they better know exactly what that means. There are other things you can do to be creative with an offer, but it's really important that they understand that they're going to be in competition, and they need to be ready for it, and they need to put it all out there on the first try, because they're probably not going to get another chance. When it comes to escalation clauses, has anybody heard of or used one of those yet? Anybody? No?
Is that like an accelerator clause?
Yeah, accelerator or escalation.
I used one last year, but I was cautioned against it in the future after using that.
Mm-hmm. So what I'll tell you based on my experience, first of all, an accelerator clause or an escalation clause, it's a document that is available in zip forms and DocuSign. It basically says the buyer is willing to pay X dollars more than their highest offer, up to X dollars. So you could say the buyer is willing to pay $2,000 over the highest offer, up to, $215,000. Now the trick with how that's written is the way it's stated, the seller has to prove that they have a legitimate offer, right? Like not their sister wrote an offer to jack up this other offer kind of a thing, but a legitimate offer. And it has to be sent directly from the seller to the buyer. It cannot go through agents. So it's like a weird, complicated thing that a lot of people don't want to deal with. But I will tell you, in competition, there are enough people out there putting it all out there without an accelerator clause. They're just saying, this is my maximum. That most of the time, those don't get addressed in my experience. So it's not really serving its purpose because there's too much noise. There's too many other aggressive offers. And you have to be careful with that, because if you are in a situation where you're not in competition, The seller sees all your buyer's cards. They know what their maximum is. This is what I'm willing to pay maximum. So it means that if you're not in competition, they could counter back at that maximum. Or if you are in competition, they know that they'd be willing to pay this, but they just didn't want to. So they made an offer for less. What good does that do in competition? So there are times it works. It is something you can pull out if your buyer's nervous about offering their absolute maximum, but I would just warn them that it may not be perceived as well as it would be in a less competitive market. So it's not quite the strong tool it can be at other times. So maybe if there's 2 offers, it works well. If there's 15, guess what? They're not even paying attention. Okay, that's their maximum, the actual offer. We'll move on. So keep that in mind. The other thing to consider, who's been working on practicing offer writing? If you're brand new, understandable that you're not, but like of your top 5, has anybody like checked that off their list? I've written several. Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Not several.
But at least one?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you're working on your top 5, one of the top 5 is an offer to purchase. Super, super important to be very well versed in that. And the best way to do that is repetition. And the best way to practice is not on your clients. Do it ahead of time. Find a listing online, get all the documents together, put everything in zip forms, do everything you would to write an offer for a client, because you need to be well versed and well practiced so there is no confusion of what your buyer's agreeing to, so that you can do this efficiently in a short period of time in competition and speed of this market, and so that you are using every inch of that offer to work to their best advantage without them being in an uncomfortable position. And the biggest piece of that is you will learn where you should be filling stuff in and what should be in there, because a clean offer is a rare offer, and that's sad. It's not that hard. It's all right there for you. So if you're not using a checkbox, what do you put in it?
NA.
Anybody? NA. When you sign your contract with Keller Williams for the office, it's in your contract that you will put NA in any line or box that you don't use. That's how important it is. Maureen has it in the contract you signed as an agent. So make sure you're filling in NA, because if there's any question as to whether that is included or not included, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look like you're on top of it. And then there could be problems down the line. If your buyer intended for that to be in there, or they didn't, and it doesn't have NA, there's problems. So make sure you're protecting them and yourself too. So make sure those boxes, those blank lines all have NA. It's annoying, but just do it. It's fast, takes a second. When you're filling out the documents, make sure you don't have misspellings. Do I have to say this? I have to say this. Make sure it's spelled right. If you're not sure, Google the word. Come on. It's probably in the document. When you're writing clauses, if you are uncertain of how that should be written, you can look to the addendum A as an example, and if that option's not in there, maybe checking in with the helpline if you need to, but those clauses should be very clear. Or if it's a contingency, it should say like, if this, then this, the seller's going to do this, and this is how we'll know it's done, and this is what's going to happen if they don't. Or the buyer has the rescission rights. Like, make sure those are complete and you're not just putting partial statements in there. It very much shows that you don't know what you're doing. It shows that there could be a problem down the line because it's not enforceable. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for as a listing agent to help my client avoid problems. So make sure that's very clear. And review it 100 times. Just review it when you're writing it, review it after your buyer signs it, review it before they sign it, review it after they sign it, review it before you send it. Because if there's problems in there and the seller agrees to it, you're stuck, whatever's in there. And that goes the same if you have a listing and you're going over 1 million contracts. Make sure you're double checking all those details before they finally pick a winner. Because once it's signed acceptance, that might be what they're stuck with. I cannot tell you how many offers I got that had misinformation, misspelled words, just straight up missing parts, like a section where someone had auto-filled something on a line, but that didn't write NA in the box or check the box. And I was like, what does this mean? Like I had to clean up offers with a counter offer because they weren't clean enough. And do you know what happens when there's a counter out there? Another offer could come in. So if you write an offer for your buyer that's messy, but the seller likes it, but there's things they need to clean up, if they counter back to clean up your mess and a great offer comes in the meantime, they could rescind their counter and take the other offer. Don't leave that window open for your buyer. Make it clean from the start. Make sense? Sounds scary. That's why you practice ahead of time. This is why it's one of the top 5. There's so much awesome stuff in there that you can tweak and use and change and work to your client's advantage to make your offer awesome. A great price is not the only thing. Like it's got to appraise, right? There's got to be other things you can do to that offer to make it appealing. And I know that's what Willie and Newbie are going to talk about in that class, but having a clean offer is a really important piece of that and is sadly rare. I remember when I started, I would send in offers with a cover page that I'd reviewed 100 times, that was clean and complete. And I would get agents calling me and thanking me for sending in a complete, clean offer. And I was like, what world is this? These are professionals. Why do I get a special star for filling this out properly? This is nuts. But that's what happens. So be the 20% and do it right and stand out in a good way. It's to your client's advantage. It's to your advantage. Yeah.
Sorry, being new, what does a transaction person do? Would they write all those? I know.
Like a transaction coordinator?
Yeah.
So you're still writing the offer. They're the one that is managing the transaction once you have an accepted offer. So they're kind of making sure, you know, they're passing documents back and forth to be signed. They're making sure you have the documents you need, communicating with you. So yeah, you're still responsible for writing that offer. Yeah, that's a good question. What other questions do you have? This is a safe space.
I have a question about open houses. I want to hold an open house probably on Sunday. And so I know it's open in MLS where I can, you know, post it in there. Is that going to post it to like Zillow and everything too?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And then is it like, do you have any recommendations for anything else? Like how to, you know, advertise it, or is like MLS really the only place I need to post it other than obviously Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, social media, you could put a open, you know, Saturday or Sunday or Thursday sign on the sign in the yard.
Okay.
People in the past have had success with, you know, flyers to the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
You could even say like, you know, neighbor exclusive first half hour or whatever, and you could send those out. Obviously, we're not doing door knocking right now, but you could like stick them on their doors with like removable tape or door hangers. Yeah, so you could spread the word in that way. There's a KW, North Shore, and Lake Country Facebook group that's specifically for like upcoming, coming soon listings. So if it's your listing, you could put it in there.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you could get the word out about that. And just, yeah, if you have any instructions for that, you could even include it in your listing. So the better we are communicating that stuff, the more likely people are to follow it.
Is there like
anybody
a
else
time to have like an open house?
A good time?
Yeah, I mean, like I know you can kind of do it whenever you want, but I mean,
they tend to be between 10:30 and 4.
Okay.
As start and end times. They tend to be an hour and a half to 2 hours, unless you're doing a twilight on a Thursday, then they're like 4 to 6.
Okay.
What I always recommend doing is look in the neighborhood and see if there are any other open houses at the same time, and try to be within that time frame, or at least overlap, because people like to go to more than one. Right now there aren't a lot happening, but as those pick up again, it's good to have overlapping times.
Yeah.
On Sundays, I would, if people are going back to church, kind of avoid church time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we have sports again, avoid Packer games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else with questions about anything I talked about or anything related to the top 5?
I just have a question about trading. I see brand new. Would this be over my head to do that today, or?
Was that Tracy? I missed a big chunk of that.
Oh, sorry. I was questioning the Tech Tuesday training. Being brand new, would that be over my head, or should I go into that today?
I mean, it doesn't hurt to pop on and just see what it's about.
That's what I've been doing. I've been joining like every single Zoom call, and there is a lot that's over your head, but like over the last like 2-3 weeks, things have been revisited and I'll be like, oh wait, I remember Lindsay talking about this. And it kind of, I've been joining everything and it's just been clicking a little bit more, but watching it, you're like, what is this? You know, but I would.
Yeah,
We have a lot of
I'd
lingo.
chime
too.
in. So yeah, campaigns is something you can certainly hop on and start doing. It's always good just to kind of get an overview of what it's all about. It's one of the applications that's in command. And sometimes hopping on those trainings, you get some really good feedback from other agents. And Brad will be on it, and he's an agent. And so he always gives really good feedback on how he's using it too. So.
Yeah, and I think it's good to just remind yourself, like give yourself some grace, whether you're brand new or you're just like, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Don't feel like you're gonna like go on and watch this thing and become this expert on the Kelly app or whatever. Like give yourself some grace that you're gonna pick up what you can, take at least one nugget and you're good. Like you don't have to absorb all of it. And you can always go back. We have a YouTube page, so you can go back and watch our meetings, you can watch launch, you can watch all the classes. So if for some reason you can't be there live, you can pick up those things later. Or if you're like, oh, I'm working on XYZ and I know there was a class about that, I'm gonna go back to YouTube and rewatch it. So they're there for your reference too.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Amanda.
You're welcome.
Amanda, I do
Thank
have
you.
a question. Have a question. Since I am day one, I am curious, when you do meet a new potential client, what does that agency client agreement look like in the conversation?
So the buyer agency agreement is what you use to establish your relationship with that buyer. The top 5 that I'm talking about, one of those things is the buyer consultation. And in that, that's usually the best time to talk about buyer agency and also to make sure you're familiar with that document as part of those top 5 things. So that can be built into that conversation. You can simplify that form and just talk about the basics of what it means, how it establishes your relationship. Very wise to have that signed before you go on showings, because it does determine how the things that you are allowed to or should be pointing out or saying, whether you're working on behalf of the buyer or the seller. So it's really wise to have that signed before showings and not to wait until you're writing an offer to do that.
So when you come across somebody and you say, are you working with an agent? And they say no, then what is your typical reply entail?
I say, I highly recommend that we sit down and, I've been doing like FaceTime calls, but normally it was in person for 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to talk about what you're looking for in a home, what can you expect from the market, what your timeline is like and what's typical for timelines within this process, what expenses you can expect. I want to set you up for success. And that's what that buyer consult is. There's, I believe we were on YouTube by then. I've done a launch class about that. And that is one of the top 5. So it'll be in the email from Mandy describing that as well. But really, really important time to set those expectations and find out what they're looking for. Have them qualify you. It's a good time for them to interview you. If they're like, well, I'm not sure. I'm like checking out other agents. Cool. This is your time to interview me and see how I work. But it's also your time to qualify them. If you see some red flags, I've been working with some red flag people lately and I highly regret it. And I saw them coming. I saw it happening. I should have caught it in the buyer consult. Like you want to take the business you can, but keep in mind like your time and your energy are important, especially right now. So it's as much about you figuring out if they're really ready to buy or not in this market, because it doesn't do them any favors to drag them around and not have them get an accepted offer eventually.
Okay.
Amanda, would you share those red flags?
Oh, I mean, it's the gambit. It's, somebody who's like, well, showing you a property and they only want to pay less than what they're asking. If it's somebody who has the expectations of a property that is $50,000 over their asking price and they're unwilling to change anything on their list, if they don't have a pre-approval yet, but they're working on it and it's been 2 months, no, you don't have time for that. And it's no favor to them to show them a house they love, but they have to write an offer on that day and they have to have a pre-approval with their offer and they don't have one yet. They have to be, one of the reasons I think a buyer consult's so important is because it shows that they are willing to put in time on their part to talk to you, to invest in this relationship and to trust you as an expert as much as you are taking your time to show them houses. So it's their a little bit of give from the beginning. As you're sharing some valuable information, they're taking the time to sit down and talk to you as well. So those things are part of it. Just not respecting your time. That can be really obvious. I had somebody call me the other day, said she was looking for an agent. I tried to get her to set up a buyer consultation and she kept talking over me and trying to interview me then and there as though I had nothing else going on. That was a big red flag. I've had people who tell me they don't want a buyer's agent. They want a bunch of other agents looking for properties for them because they think that's the best way to find a property. And I say, that's great. I'm not the agent for you. I work exclusively for people and I work really hard as your buyer's agent. If you want 10 agents looking for you, I'm not your agent. Be direct early on because you can save yourselves a lot of drama later. Yeah, and if you've got a couple, make sure you're sitting down with both of them. The screwiest deals I've had are the ones that don't have buyer consultations or people where I get one of a couple because that tells you they are not on the same page. And that's going to be true the whole time. This is too crazy of a market to be struggling with that stuff. Like everybody's got to be on the same page and ready and equipped and informed. A team moving forward together. If you've got stuff going on within that relationship, it's going to be really, really hard to get an accepted offer. You're just going to be spinning your wheels, which to some extent is like, cool, I get the experience. This is great. But like at some point, like you don't want to be burned out right at the beginning from working with somebody who's not ready. Anybody else? All right, so just a reminder, I am doing accountability calls. I have 0 scheduled right now, 0. I've had 6 people contact me. This is how it works because this is how you will set appointments with clients. I want you to text me to say who you are, that you want to set up an accountability check-in. It's going to be 15 minutes long. We'll set up a time and then you call me. This is how it works when you have a client. So this is why we're doing it this way. So you call me, we have 15 minutes and I want to find out where you stand with your top 5 and how your business is going. This is not a time to ask helpline questions. That's what the helpline's for. So this is a time to say, okay, here's where I stand. If we need to talk about mindset to like help you get over the hump of some of the things that you're working on in your top 5, that's okay. But it's really focused on where you stand with your top 5 and it's accountability. Because it's a chance to say you have a deadline for this thing. You're going to talk to Amanda on this day, and I'm going to ask you where you are with that thing we talked about last time. So it doesn't mean you should be doing all 5 things at the same time. Just pick the thing you're working on. I've had people call me and talk about where they stand with their buyer consultation and what the packet looks like, what they're thinking of for their pages, or if they're just going to do an outline, whether they've practiced with other agents or on family or friends. So those are the kinds of things I'm looking for. If you're working on your offer to purchase, what resources have you used? Are you putting it in zip forms? Did you include all the other documents that must be turned in with an offer? How has that process gone for you? So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. Where are you in terms of your progress on your top 5 and getting your 5 transactions closed? So it's a chance to check in. For me, I need that. I need a deadline. I need somebody holding me accountable. And so that's why that's there for you. So text me if you want to do that, and we'll set up a time for a 15-minute accountability call. And if you are wanting to know about the top 5, it's in the launch page. As a reminder, it's your offer to purchase, your buyer consultation, which includes your buyer agency agreement, listing presentation, listing contract, and 100 contacts in MLS. Or pardon me, in Command. 100 contacts in Command, which is huge to get things rolling with your business. So, and as complete as you can make those contacts. So phone and email and address, you know, start with what you have, build that up. So pick one and work on it. Set a time every day to work on it. Set a certain day of the week you work on it. Block out your time in a way that works for you and just focus on that and get it done. Don't try to do all 5 at once. And obviously you're doing business at the same time. We understand that. If you don't have the helpline, we'll post it again. Let's see. I think I got all the other questions. If you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to put them on the Facebook page. This will also be on YouTube if you want to review it again. Definitely take a look at that June schedule for classes. And thanks for hanging with me a little past our 11:30 time. I really appreciate it. And I like seeing all your faces. So please continue to use your camera while we're meeting. That helps me with feedback as well. I can't wait till we can be in person again, but thank you for joining me virtually. And to those of you who are brand new, welcome. Don't worry about being too overwhelmed. We're glad you're here. We have tons of great resources. Just pick the bits that'll work for you. We all do this a little differently. And yeah, just get out there and be a professional and stand out in a good way. You guys all have it in you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.